First of all, I disagree with you with regards to the best or not the best. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows best.
No, this is my feeling, sir.
Jazakallah khairan. Barakallah feek. I love you for the sake of Allah, brother Khurshid. Do not misunderstand me. But I'm not that person. Alhamdulillah, shukla. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala purify all of us. فَلَا تُزَكُّ أَنفُسَكُمْ هُوَ أَعْلَمُ بِمَنِ اتَّقَى. Second, believe it or not, that it is not necessarily true that all Muslims, he said every Muslim knows that riba is haram. You're lucky that you know it is haram. You're lucky that you avoid it. I'm lucky that I'm in this position, alhamdulillah, shukla, and I don't deal with riba. I try my best and I try to inform people. But traveling across the world, I came to realize that most of Muslims do not really know what's halal and haram in their religions. Most Muslim women do not know that hijab is mandated by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran. As far as the wisdom behind the prohibition of interest, some of that is mentioned in the Quran. And by the way, riba is not limited to charging interest for loans or selling or buying. This is one category of riba. There is something called riba al-fadl. There is something called riba an-nasa, or the delay. There are certain items such as gold, silver, barley, grains, wheat, rice, which are basic needs for human beings. The Prophet ﷺ said, if any of these items were traded, gold for gold, it must be the same amount, yadan biyad, which means give and take at the same time, in the same sitting. If we trade gold for gold, the same amount, guess what? The same amount. Salt for salt, barley for barley, and the same amount, 10 pounds, 10 pounds, a ton for a ton. But with a delay, you give me yours and say a month later I will give yours. That's called riba. That's called riba, riba an-nasa, due to a delay. We definitely need to explain the different categories of riba and why. Why? Because when it comes to the basic needs of human beings, most people would borrow because of necessity. So when you take advantage of somebody's need and necessity and you say, I will give you this, but for an increase when you pay, then you're taking advantage of the need and the desperate financial situation of this person. That's why the Prophet ﷺ considered the reward for giving a loan or lending somebody money is greater than the reward for giving in a charity. Because when you give in a charity, you give something that's extra. You possess it, but it is beyond your need. You can live without it. You can donate as much as you want, but you know that you're saving for yourself what will suffice for your needs and luxury needs as well. But when you give somebody a loan, this is not necessarily a case. When my brother comes to me and says, my wife is giving birth right now, please give me some money. I cannot afford the hospital bills. And all what I have is $1,000, riyal or dirham. And I say, bro, no problem, here. And I give him the 1,000. Or I give him the 900. I give him the money which I'm saving for my needs, which I may collect it or I may not. So I'm taking the risk. And that's why in one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, on the day of judgment, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will present one of his servants and will say, Abdi, do you have any good deed? He say, Ya Rabbi lah. He doesn't have any good deed whatsoever. His record is empty. All of us are full of sins, of course. But when it comes to good deeds, he doesn't remember. He said, except one thing I remember. What is it? Whenever I used to lend somebody money, and this person was broke or was in a financial situation which won't allow him to pay on time, I would give him a respite. I would say, okay, that's fine. Maybe next month, give him a respite, give him a respite, and so on. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, indeed we are more generous than you. We are more worthy to pardon than you. I have forgiven you your sins, and He will admit him to His paradise. There are a bunch of ahadith and ayat encouraging us to assist and help those who are in need. So when somebody is lending money with interest, basically the rich gets richer and the poor gets poorer. If you're asking for a modern explanation, George W. Bush, last week in his second term and before he leaves office, before he steps down, he signed a bill for reducing the interest rate on the mortgage loans to be at 0%. That is exactly the Islamic transaction dealing, the Islamic way of doing business, of lending and borrowing. Everybody has the right to have a house or a flat or an apartment. So when the government or when those who are rich help somebody by giving him a loan, they shouldn't charge him interest for that. Somebody will say, but what I'm trying to say, this is the head of capitalism in the world, the United States of America. When they finally signed this bill and reached this conclusion, this is a modern proof that لا يصح إلا الصحيح. And the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His sharia prevails even in these countries which do not believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In France, in Germany, here and there. We realize that whether communism, capitalism do not serve the purpose of humanity the right way. But in between is Islamic way of dealing, which is a moderate way. If somebody is poor, if somebody is in need, we should rush to help them financially. If they have to borrow money to suffice for their basic needs, Baytu Mal al-Muslimin, or the bank of donations, whether it is voluntary donations or the mandatory donations such as the zakat, which should be collected for the merchants and those rich people who possess the nisab and more, will be responsible for sufficing the basic needs of these guys, so there should not be any poor. And that's why it is stated that if you ever find a poor person, then it is simply because the fact that there is a rich person did not pay his zakah. Did not pay his zakah. Somebody might object to that and say, well, that may make sense, but when it comes to dealing with the poor and those who are in need, what about if a millionaire has, or a multimillionaire has a factory and he wants to expand? He wants to open another plant in Europe and open here and there, and he wants a loan. If I give him the loan without interest, then I'm losing. I say, don't give him a loan. Instead, go in a partnership with him, which is known as murabaha, which, according to your part and share in this company and partnership, you get a profit, percentage of the profit. And that also means you will be a partner in the loss as well as in the profit. So that is fair for everybody. I believe there is a lot more to speak about it in the explanation of the wisdom behind, because the Jews at the time of the Prophet ﷺ considered riba haram. It is haram in Christianity, in Judaism, in every divine book. But they said it is haram to deal with it amongst ourselves. But if you're lending money to others, to the Arab, to the Bedouins, you should charge interest. So it is halal when you deal with others, but amongst ourselves it's haram. This is not fair. In Islam, whatever applies to Muslims applies to non-Muslims as well. And they claim there is no difference between al-bay', which is selling and buying and trade, and riba. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala explained in the Quran, no, of course there is a big difference. He said, وَأَحَلَّ اللَّهُ الْبَيْعَ وَحَرَّمَ الرِّبَى. Because of some of the reasons I mentioned earlier, but the wisdom behind the prohibition of riba, we covered some before the break, and we may add to that that it leads to laziness. The rich will get richer without doing anything. They can just sit and their money will be doubled on account of squeezing the poor and taking advantage of their needs. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala established the relationship between human beings on the basis of التعاون على البر والتقوى وتعاونوا على البر والتقوى ولا تعاونوا على الإثم والعدوان, not on the basis of taking advantage of the people's needs. بارك الله فيكم.